Now the one that I'm saving the Hispanic for the last because it may be longer, but I have a nice collection of books about Asians. There's so many more you could get. One of my favorites is this one. If you remember New Faces on Main Street, this is the people, they made quilts. Now, we made quilts. My parents made quilts, my mother. And the quilts were always just squared off things, etc., etc. But here, and I'm going to kind of get in on this, you can see that this is a quilt showing the airplanes dropping bombs on Hmong villages. And that's because the communist soldiers killed the Hmong men. Hmong, H-M-O-N-G, were people, a tribal people lived in the mountains of Laos, right up against the Mekong River. I think it was Mekong. They were on the border with Vietnam. They helped us, and you can see those are Vietnamese soldiers there. And then these are the Hmong running in their black outfits. You can see their hats. You can probably look this up on the internet and get a better picture. But I've never seen a quilt with a plane strafing human beings. And here's a huge quilt. I've always thought if these weren't cultural artifacts, I'd give anything to own one of these. Because it's the history of a people. They could not speak, they couldn't write because even their language, they didn't have an alphabet to write in their own language. They weren't educated. So they made these quilts, and men made these quilts, and women made these quilts. Here's being a refugee. It shows there's refugee camp Binai, and that's probably in Thailand, probably. And it shows, you can see the planes taking off from the airport to take them to America. Shows some of the artifacts. So if you have refugees, especially in Wisconsin, Minnesota, there are Hmong people there. This is a really important book. If you do not have a book about a culture in the library, they're invisible. Nobody can read about them. I have other books here too. This one is, I believe this is a Vietnamese book called The Lotus Seed. Journey Home, which I think is, I can't really see if that's Cambodian or not. Maybe. I have to look in these. Oh, it's Vietnam. This one's Vietnamese. So this one's Vietnamese. Farmer Duck in Vietnamese. Here's what I like about these books. Not only the illustration, but see? The Vietnamese is right up the top. And so bilingual books, dual language books, can be read by both the ESL person, if that's their language, and it can be read by everybody else because they're in English. I like this one, How My Parents Learned to Eat. It's about an American marrying a Japanese girl. And it's from the Reading Rainbows selection. Cambodian books here. There's two books, Judge Rabbit and the Tree Spirit. And this one, Cambodian Folk Stories from Catalog. And so these are folk stories. Now, the ones that really interest me, oh, I got a Sri Lanka one, the quail's egg. These three are Japanese. This one is about the Japanese that were put in the internment camps because of World War II. It shows them in the internment camp. And it's called Passage to Freedom, the Sugihara story. And then it was an American bookseller pick list. Here's another one, award winner, Baseball Saved Us. And I think it's mentioned in those documents I sent to you. The kids played baseball in the camps, and it kept up the morale. Imagine this, look at this. The kids are playing baseball. These are kids that were raised up in the United States. Here's an American guard looking at them. And you imagine intern camps. We don't like to talk about that issue. Here's another one we don't like to talk about, and this is an extraordinary book. Hiroshima no Pika. Has on August 6th, 8:15 a.m., 1945. Little girl and her parents reading breakfast, and then it happened. My understanding is in Japan, people did not want to talk about the unpleasantry of World War II, and especially the nuclear weapons that were detonated. And you actually have people, and you can see the actual suffering. You see them being knocked down, the fire, People are naked. Their clothes have been burned off. Children are running. You can see bodies piled up. People on fire. Me turned and saw a young woman holding a baby and crying. We escaped this far, and then I stopped to feed him, she said. But he wouldn't take his milk. He's dead. She was still holding the baby, wading into the river. She waded in deeper and deeper until Mia couldn't see her anymore. This is like hell. The woman died after she gave her a rice bowl. People being carried, their clothes are off. Clothes are flying in the air. I'm going to read this to you because I think these books have such an impact on you. This is why war is good to avoid at all costs. Me never grew after that day. Many years have passed and she is still the same size she was when she was 7 years old. It is because of the flash from the bomb, her mother says. Her head itches and her mother parts her hair and sees something shiny and pulls it out with tweezers. It's glass embedded when the bomb went off years ago. Her father had 7 wounds in his body, but they healed, and for a while he thought he was okay. Then one day in autumn, after the flash, his hair fell out and he began coughing blood. Purple spots appeared all over his body and he died. I don't know if you know this, but the United States said there was no such thing as radiation poisoning. And that was so people didn't even acknowledge that they were killed by the radiation from the bomb. Now you may ask and say, well, it's war. Well, yeah, that's why. It's war. Horrible things happen at war on all sides. But they're making lamps there, Japanese lamps to remember people. I think they made cranes too, but this is lamps. And people did not want to, people got very upset and didn't want to talk about it after it happened because of the suffering. Here's the lady who was She also wrote about the what the Japanese did to the city of Nanking, I think it's Shanghai, in World War II. There was a terrible massacre of Chinese civilians in that city. So she has painted about that as well. Okay, so she's not a person who ignores suffering on one side and not the other. So she's found fault with their country and also what was done to their country. So anyhow, I love this book because it talks about war, and I think it makes a difference because we have a moral duty to have people experience other cultures, but to also experience events. Okay, one more.